Bill Gunn was an American playwright, novelist, actor, and director. While not very well known in the mainstream, he's gone on to be recognized as one of the most important figures in Black American cinema. Gunn was born in Philadelphia in 1934 and grew up with a love of both writing and acting. In 1954, he acted in his first Broadway play, The Immoralist. One night, his talents caught the attention of producer Chiz Schultz. Schultz wanted to cast him in something, but didn't have any parts that were right for him at the time. While Schultz searched for a role, the two became friends. During that time, Gunn had small parts in TV shows like The Defenders and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Schultz had been working with Harry Belafonte for a few years and was able to hire Gunn to write the screenplay for The Angel Levine. After that, he wrote The Landlord, which was Hal Ashby's first feature in 1970. Warner Brothers liked his work and flew Gunn out to Hollywood to be one of their writers. He was able to turn that into a writing and directing job on his first film, Stop. This was a very big deal. It made him one of the first blacks to be entrusted with a film from a major Hollywood studio. Gunn delivered his first film, Stop, which received an X rating, so the studio shelved it permanently. Rough cuts of the film have been shown at events like a Gunn retrospective at the Whitney Museum of American Art, but the film was never officially released. 2 years later, Gunn won an Emmy Award for his teleplay, Johannes, which was adapted from his stage play. Around this time, Hollywood began to make and market movies that would appeal to a black audience. Junius Griffin, the head of the LA division of the NAACP, coined the term BLAXSPLOITATION. The first BLAXSPLOITATION film is one of two films, depending on who you ask. It's usually considered to be the 1971 film Shaft, but many feel that it was Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song from Melvin Peebles, the father of future actor, director, and producer Mario Van Peebles. BLAXSPLOITATION movies were often loaded with action, and often had themes of revenge, or heavily revolved around crime. The films primarily had a mostly black cast and crew. In 1972, Blackula was released, and according to film historians, it made a fortune. With this, studios were looking to make various knockoffs. At the same time, film producers Quentin Kelly and Jack Jordan formed the partnership Kelly Jordan Enterprises. They had a plan to finance 5 films, each for $350,000. They wanted to make them with mostly black filmmakers, covering black themes. The result was Honey Baby, Honey Baby, directed by Michael Schultz and starring Diana Sands. Maya Angelou was going to make a film in California, but the whole thing went bust. They hired an African ambassador to do one, but that also fell through. The other was a James Baldwin story, which never came to fruition. Kelly Jordan contacted Bill Gunn with the proposition to make a black vampire film. Gunn thought about it and really didn't want to make a black vampire film. However, he'd been longing to direct again, and decided to take the job. He was going to make a black vampire film, but it would be unlike anything they had seen before. So the concept for Ganja and Hess was born. The name was an intentional reference to marijuana. It was an allegory for a disappointing life and the consolation a little ganja can bring. He didn't want to make a blaxploitation film. He wanted to make an experimental horror film, one that dealt with themes of alienation, religious and cultural identity, and the hunger for power. However, the biggest theme within the movie would be using vampirism as a metaphor for addiction. He wrote the film about Dr. Hess Green, an anthropologist studying the history of a blood-addicted Nigerian culture that had gone extinct. He's murdered by George Mita, who unknowingly stabs him with an artifact Hess is studying, an ancient ceremonial dagger. After realizing what he's done, Mita kills himself, but Hess is reborn because being killed by the dagger grants that person immortality, but also the constant need to consume blood. For the lead character of Hess, Gunn hired Dwayne Jones. Jones played the iconic hero Ben in George Romero's groundbreaking film Night of the Living Dead. Jones was an English professor and almost didn't take the role for fear of being typecast. Bill Gunn cast himself in the small but essential part of George Mita. For Mita's power-hungry wife, he hired actress Marlena Clark. Gunn had worked with Clark on his 1970 film Stop and knew she was the right choice to play Ganja Mita. Actresses like Marlena Clark weren't getting much work back then. While it may seem odd now, Hollywood had little interest in attractive black actresses. At the time, if they needed a black actress, they usually focused on the mammy stereotype, more along the lines of Mabel King, who was hired to play the Myrthian Queen. The director of photography was James Hinton, who was the first black DOP in North American filmmaking. Unlike most blaxploitation, Gunn wanted to present Hess as an intelligent black character and not just a killer. He was a doctor, he spoke French, and was rich, something never really seen in Hollywood productions at the time. He wanted to lift up black culture and not tear it down. With the small budget, they had to film the movie as a non-union production. One day, shortly before filming, Schultz was approached by a member of the Teamsters. The Teamsters are the largest labor union in the world. They allegedly have a history of sabotaging various productions if they're not brought in for work. He told Schultz they found out they'd be filming a movie in this location, and they'd need to hire a certain amount of Teamsters for the film. Schultz told them this was a very small, non-union production, and there was no way they'd be able to afford them for the film. The guy then told Schultz, "You know, this house is made of wood, and old places like this are very flammable," implying they'd burn the place down if they weren't hired. Schultz informed them this was a film where the cast was black, the crew was black, and almost everyone involved was black. The Teamster laughed and told him to go ahead and shoot. "We don't want to work on this film." Schultz joked it was probably the only time when racism had a positive outcome. The opening of the film was shot in the Brooklyn Museum of Art. The church was a church nearby where the director lived in New York. The mansion where most of the film took place belonged to the Nuremberg family. At the time, it was up for sale, and they were able to work with a real estate agent who allowed them to film there. When the characters had to drink blood in the film, the blood was tomato juice. Even though he knew it was just juice, Jones had a hard time drinking it. In the scene where he was drinking Mita's blood after he killed himself, he got nauseous and would retch uncontrollably. As filming progressed, Gunn made changes to the script. Often while working on a film, ideas will come up or happy accidents that make something better. Gunn was seeing the film taking shape and decided to go in a more surreal direction. He wanted the movie to be more driven by mood and atmosphere than story. This made the studio nervous when they saw the dailies. They could see that this was not going to be a commercial black vampire film. They called a meeting with Gunn and Schultz, insisting he make the film more commercial. The meeting got heated, and Gunn got so angry he threw a chair out the window. One of the executives said, "You're crazy!" Schultz recalled Gunn told him, "I have more crazy in the top drawer of my bureau than you could ever imagine." After that, the studio left them alone. After filming, Gunn worked with editor Victor Kanefsky. They made the footage into a moody, atmospheric film that's not about what happens, but how those things happen. It was far removed from the commercial vampire film the studio wanted. The producers watched it and gave up on it almost immediately. They said it couldn't be distributed. Since 3 of the 5 movies they produced never came to fruition, they were hoping to be able to recoup their losses with this. Gunn and Schultz told them to open the film in art house theaters and let the audience grow by word of mouth. They suggested letting the film build and then to do the festival circuit. The studio ignored this and had a grand opening at the 57th Street Theater in New York in April of 1973. Kelly Jordan invited the audience, who was expecting Blackula. Not surprisingly, the audience hated it. Critics trashed it and said it wasn't the right time for a black art film. After 3 days, they pulled it from the theater. The studio went back to the editor and asked him to recut the film. Kanefsky shrugged it off and told him he liked the film as it was. As a way to prove his movie was good, Gunn took one of the prints and entered it in the Cannes Film Festival. He arranged for it to be screened during Critics Week, and it received a standing ovation from the audience. French critics showered the film with praise, in a stark contrast to the criticism it received in the US. Despite the huge amounts of praise the movie had been receiving overseas, Kelly Jordan sold Ganja and Hess to another distributor, Heritage Enterprises. They hired a post-production specialist to recut the film. He was given all the footage Gunn shot, not just what was used in his cut of the movie. Novak was told to make the film more exploitable, so they could sell it in a double bill. He cut the film down to 78 minutes, 33 minutes shorter than the original cut. It also had roughly 15 minutes of footage not seen in Gunn's version. The movie was renamed A Blood Couple, and was quite a different take on the same material. Heritage invited Bill Gunn, Chiz Schultz, Victor Kanefsky, and James Hinton to a screening. After 10 minutes, Gunn walked out. The new cut was exactly the opposite of the film he wanted to make. Gunn, Schultz, and Kanefsky all had their names removed from this version. Hinton left his on because while he didn't like the new version, what was being seen was what he had shot. The new version of the movie played at various grindhouse theaters, but did very poorly and was sold back to Kelly Jordan. In December of 1973, The Exorcist opens and is a massive hit. Kelly Jordan tried to take advantage of this, so they re-released the film under another title, Double Possession. Over the years, the film was retitled and re-released numerous times. After Double Possession, it was Black Vampire, Black Evil, and Blackout, The Moment of Terror. Gunn had kept an original 35mm print of his version of the film and gave it to the Museum of Modern Art for safekeeping. The film was screened numerous times and had become one of the most requested titles from MoMA's collection. In 1980, Gunn was invited to screen Ganja and Hess at the Independent Black American Film Festival in Paris. His print of the film had been screened so many times, it was damaged due to scratches and stretching. Meanwhile, there was a plethora of the various other inferior versions of the film. Gunn sadly died in 1989 of encephalitis. Over the years, the film became better known and was acknowledged as a neglected classic of independent African-American cinema. In the mid-1990s, a company called All Day Entertainment worked with the Museum of Modern Art and the Film Foundation to restore the film elements as best they could for a DVD release. So now, in the late 90s, about 25 years after the film was released, the original Ganja and Hess could be seen again. The film was praised as a landmark production in black cinema, and seemed to finally get the attention in the US it deserved all the way back in 1973. In 2013, director Spike Lee did a crowdfunding campaign on Kickstarter for his newest, hottest Spike Lee joint, The Sweet Blood of Jesus, which was a remake of Ganja and Hess. The Kickstarter campaign pulled in about $1.4 million, and he released the film in 2015. The remake was trashed by both audiences and critics. They cited it had none of the artistic value of the original, and the changes Lee made to the film only made things worse. Ganja and Hess is indeed a landmark film in black cinema. While Gunn may not have delivered what the studio paid for, what he gave them was an artistic vision that would far outlast the blaxploitation film they wanted. The film is not for everyone. Gunn wanted the movie to speak for itself, and what you see in the film is what you'll take out of it. This was definitely a film ahead of its time. It's sad how American critics were against the film and wanted it to be something else. I personally love blaxploitation, and just because it's exploitation doesn't mean it's not relevant to black culture. Movies like Shaft, Dolomite, and Black Caesar all deserve their place in film history. However, Ganja and Hess is something different. It's not just a black vampire film, but a visually arresting film about addiction and redemption. In fact, the word vampire is never uttered in either version of the film. While the film does have its bloody moments, audiences had no problems with that. It seemed the scene that had the most people wincing was when Mita brushed his teeth using his dirty bathwater. Thanks to the film being restored, it's finally gained the full recognition it always deserved. It's a shame the recognition had to come after the director's passing.
Dr. Green, actually, I thought to throw myself in one of your lakes, but I have an absolute horror of drowning.
Thank God your horrors outweigh your manners.